Steven,
What?
hello. Welcome to your show.
My show, that's right. I'm doing a show today. Okay. Let's do a show today.
So you were on Anton and Hayden's show about 10 days ago, and you thought, nah, that's not for you. You want your
It was
own
okay.
show.
It just wasn't enough.
So welcome to Feuertips. Everybody, if you're joining, welcome to say hi and put a note in the comments. Steven is launching Feuertips today. Steven, you want to tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing and when, because there was some confusion around when we will be doing this as well.
Okay, so what I decided is that I really like the tips program that Anton and Hayden do, and I like their banter back and forth, but two people sharing the show. Anyway, so I'm going to be doing the tip. We're going to be talking. You're going to help me make sure people understand my tip, etc. But the basic idea is that, let's say hour-long webcasts are so 2020, shall we say. I didn't want to get back into the mode of these hourly programs and long presentations. I like to keep things short and sweet, get back to work or go have your lunch, or even best of all, go outside. So the idea is that I'm going to give you a tip, and the tip is going to be a bit more lengthy than Anton and Hayden's approach. I'll not only show you an idea, a tip, but then we'll go exploring. And we'll take a look at code and look at variations. At least that's what we're going to do today. And then after that, then the fun really begins, because you're going to get to take a quiz about what you just heard and saw, and hopefully you'll remember some of it. And then if you get it all right, and believe me, I'm not trying to make these tricky quizzes, you will be entered into a raffle to win the privilege of picking from among several different nonprofit groups working on the environment. And we will make a donation to that organization, and we'll do this each and every week.
In your name.
Sorry?
In your name.
In their name. That's right. Not in my name.
In the name of the winner.
That's right. And we'll be announcing the winner and the organization and all that in the next tip next week. And starting next week, we're going to be doing the tips on Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern. Is that right, Michelle? Did I get it right?
You did. Yes.
Not Tuesdays at 12, Wednesdays at 11. Yeah.
Now I have to go and change all of our assets, all the stuff I've been working on. You made me change it, but I think Wednesday at 11 is going to work.
I'm a big PETA. I'm a big pain. That's right. That's right. So shall we get started?
We shall. Let's get started. But first of all, so about the quiz, I'm going to give you all a little bit of homework. Let me share my screen. We are going to be using Kahoot for this. So while I'm just going to ask you guys to, if you want to participate in the quiz, go to kahoot.it and enter this game pin. Actually, sorry, we have Mark is away this week, so I am on the show and producing at the same time. So be patient with me. We have a little banner here.
So go to Kahoot.it, enter the game pin 6840316. And then you'll be ready to wait until we actually turn on the quiz at the end of my talk. But get all ready so that you can answer. And there's not any real ranking from our standpoint. If you get it right, you qualify to pick the charity. But you might see some rankings, and that's just based on the speed with which you answer plus your correctness. And happy if you're in the top whatever, but for the purposes of the prize, it doesn't matter a bit.
Let me
what matters is that you're here and you want to learn.
I can see people are joining. Santa, Alex, Clement, Rich, Katie are all so perfect. So okay. As we're going through the tip, just go in there and it'll just wait. And as soon as Steven's done with the tip, we will go into the quiz. So I will hide that. Okay, so Steven, here at INSIM, we develop a lot of Apex applications, right?
Yeah, sure do.
Obviously, part of Apex means there's going to be a lot of PL SQL code.
There sure should.
You are going to tell us if we are writing good code and if we are putting it in the right place, correct?
That's what I'm going to take a look at today. And every one of my tips will not be focused within Apex. In fact, what I'm going to talk about is not specific to Apex, but you'll see it in an Apex context. And I said there should be a lot of PL SQL code. Well, it depends, right? So if you're using Apex to build applications, it's a low-code tool, which means that you can build an awful lot of applications and an awful lot of screens in your apps without writing any PL SQL code. But most non-trivial applications will end up requiring some PL SQL to be written, and hopefully you'll do it the right way. I think one of the sort of inherent dangers of a low-code tool, especially one that is as flexible as Apex in the sense that it can go from low-code to high-code to meet whatever the demands are, is that we love so much living in that point and click world that when we have to sort of descend into actually writing code, it sometimes is like the second class citizen. We do it, we hurry back to the point and click, and you can end up with a big mess of code in your applications, and it's something you really want to avoid. So let's dive in. So my tip today is actually, what?
I'm just saying I've put that back up because we're getting comments and questions about the pin, to remind people of the pin. So that's up, and I will keep putting it up throughout the show so that you won't. So don't worry about it. We'll be putting that back up.
No worries.
All right.
Okay. In fact, I'll probably just ignore that altogether. So if there's something up there that I should pay attention to,
I'll let you know. No worries.
Okay. So for the tip this week, it's actually a repeat and a building upon the tip from 10 days ago around Apex and using case expressions. So the tip is essentially try not to use if statements so much and instead switch to case expressions and case statements. And now I'll go back and explore some code. So let's go ahead and share my screen.
Okay. I've shared your screen.
So what I've got here is I'm inside Apex Application Builder Object Browser, and I've got a table. It's a really complicated table. It's my tree rescuers table. As some of you may know, I've gotten really obsessed about cutting back invasives in the community around Chapel Hill where I live to help native species flourish, grow, survive. And so I rescue trees every week. It's incredibly, profoundly satisfying, keeps me in good shape, keeps me outdoors. If you're interested in doing something like that, let me know and I will help you get started wherever you are and whatever invasives is appropriate. So I've got my little table here. You're a tree rescuer. What day did you start? And are you certified to use herbicides? So that's a yes, no column. But I also have a business rule that you're going to see in the code. And the business rule is that you can lead a team of other volunteers if you've been around in the program for at least a year. So your start date is at least a year in the past. All right.
Okay.
So let's look at some actual code. Here's my application. Here's my page tree. I'm not even going to run it. Don't worry about it. It's nothing interesting. Here's my tree rescuer ID, the name, herbicide certified. So these are based on the table. And then I've got eligible to lead. Notice it's display only because it's a business rule. I'm showing true or false. Can you lead a group? All right. So I need to populate that row. And of course, I could probably use a standard form, but I wrote some code. So here's my first iteration. I needed to basically populate my items, and then I needed to set this eligible to lead item to yes or no, depending on the date. So I grab my information from the table.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I declare a couple of variables.
Yep.
So I grab the information from the table, and then I say, well, okay, you're eligible if the start date is more than, isn't that more than 60 days? Less than, more than, yes. I get so confused around dates. All right, I think that's the correct formula. If anybody thinks I've got it backwards, let me know. So if the start date is more than a year in the past, you're eligible. So then I say, well, if eligible is equal to true, then set it to yes.
Okay, that doesn't.
Otherwise, set it to no.
That doesn't look right.
Why?
Eligible equals true.
It compiles.
Okay.
So what doesn't look right to you? It just doesn't look right, right? It can be hard to. So it's good that you pointed that out because when people aren't used to using Boolean variables and types, we tend to treat it a little bit like the other stuff. So, if else star date equals sys date, if string equals ABC, but Booleans have values of true, false, or null. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to say equals true. You just say, is it, if eligible, then.
Right.
Okay, so we got rid of a little bit of silliness from the code. But here's my point. Whenever you see these kinds of if statements in which, especially this form in which you're assigning a value to a variable like this, think about using a case expression instead. So let's get out of this one. And let's take a look at a rewrite, or my first rewrite of that silly little process. Okay, so now I no longer declare a Boolean variable. I just get my information. And then right inside, so here was my if statement from before. But instead, what I'm going to do is take this logic, put it inside the assignment. So case, when this is true, yes, else no. So it's a little Boolean converter, essentially. Move true and false to yes and no. And if it's null, it's also null. Now, so this is the core idea, and we'll go exploring further. But the idea now is that instead of the if statement, I have a case expression. I can also have case statements that I'll show you in a moment. Now, one of the reasons I especially like this conversion is that even though it's simple, and it's obviously not a big deal to read this either way, I have to look inside the if statement to find out what I'm doing. With the case expression, notice right away, I know I'm assigning a value to this variable. And all the logic for the assignment is tucked away inside the case. So I really like how it expresses much more clearly the focus of the work I'm doing. Questions?
Well, there's a comment from Rich about the date interval, the date format. This date minus interval 1 year would be better and more accurate.
So yes, there's no question. There are better ways to express this. For example, not every year has 365 days. Absolutely right, Rich. And in fact, we'll come back to that because one of the biggest problems about this formula is not whether or not it's right, but the fact is that I've exposed it for everybody to look at, which is a really bad idea generally about business rules. I'll come back to that. Any other comments from the audience? We can always depend on Rich to come up with something, I know, but let's see if there's anybody else. No?
So what if I wanted to use this code somewhere else? Would you want me to put all of this code anywhere else?
Right. So as I said, this is exposed. This query is exposed. Basically what I'm doing is writing a lot of code inside Apex. And in general, this is something I suggest you not do. So we're going to take a look at where to take this code. But before I do that, I want to take a look at case statements a little bit more closely. So I've gone over to LiveSQL, livesql.oracle.com. I hope you all know about it. Great place to just play around with SQL and PL SQL. And there's a code library of literally hundreds of scripts, hundreds just for me and hundreds more. So what I'm going to do is search for case expression.
And by the way, Monty agrees that it should be a function since the rule could change in the future.
All right, fine. Give it all away, Monty. Thanks a lot. Okay, so just so you can search for case expression or case, you'll find one of my scripts around case, and there are others in there as well. But just to give you a sense of the variety available and the power of case, here's the kind of standard if, else, if statement that you might see. So if grade equals A, if grade equals B, if grade equals C. And this is a classic anti-pattern in the sense that when you move it to case, well, first of all, here's my first conversion to case, and it pretty much looks the same. Not much different. But what I can also do is have a much simpler case statement, case expression, in which all the logic is embedded into it. So now it's automatically checking grade against A. So I don't have to say grade and equals A, grade and equals B. Much more concise. So a couple things to notice. I can have a case statement in which I have to say end case, or I can have a case expression, in which case I just say end. So that's one big difference from if. If is only a statement. It cannot be part of an expression. And because you can have it as part of an expression, you can just have so much fun. So let's see, I'm going to skip over that one. Here's an example of embedded case. So I've got this function, get me the days in the period as a string. And so I've got some logic here with my case statement, and then I concatenate it to some other stuff. And oh, here's another case. So you can have cases within cases. You can build complex expressions all in one statement. And you could say to yourself or say to me, Steven, that's interesting, but couldn't you overdo it? Couldn't you end up with a case expression that's like a page long with 15 cases inside it and it's virtually unreadable? And what if I want to evaluate an individual case expression inside of it and see why the value is coming back wrong? Yeah, you could abuse case expressions and case statements just like anything else in PL SQL. So one of the downsides you could say is that if I put a lot of logic inside the case expression, then if I want to see what this value is, I can't really get at it, for example, for tracing. So sometimes it's actually worth decomposing complex case expressions into step-by-step assignments to essentially temporary variables. And then you build the case expression combining those variables, because then you can put in some trace points and look at the values of those intermediate data points. So no question, it's not always the best thing to build very large, complex, dense expressions, but case certainly gives you a lot more flexibility in so many ways. And it makes you look kind of modern. If all you've got are if statements, or even worse, decode use in your SQL, then it looks like you're kind of an old school database program. And of course, you know that we're already considered old school. So you don't want to go too old in the old school. Okay, so that's my drill down into case. And again, just go to LiveSQL, check it out at your leisure. Now let's go back into this code. So I would argue that it's better than it was before. But the problem is that I'm still exposing all this logic. In fact, to my way of thinking, when it comes to building Apex applications, the only time you should see SQL statements is when they're driving reports. So my suggestion is that when you have processes like these, conditions, everything like that, never write your own SQL. Instead, put it in a back-end program unit. Then you can leverage here. There's less code in your app. It's easier to manage in your packages, and which is where they should be. And then you can reuse the logic. So let's take a look at that. So I said, no way that I want all this logic here. What I'd rather see is something like this. So now I've got a procedure, and it says, get all my tree rescuer information. I get the ID. I get the name, whether it's herbicide or not. Am I eligible to lead? So notice what I've done here is move the logic for this formula into this procedure. Let's go take a look. Make it a little bit bigger. So there's my get tier info, and it's really not much to it. There's my select statement. There's my conversion to a Boolean out parameter.
That you're going to change now based on Rich's comment.
I don't know. I think I might leave
I
it
don't
like
mean now, but you know when you'll need to use
But
this.
did he give us a specific recoding? What did he think it should be? Let's save that. We don't have a lot of time here. So, but the point. Let's make the point this way. Now you only have to go to this one place, maybe, to change the formula. So at least it's not sitting in the application, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's better. Less code here, and also, of course, I can say call get tr info anywhere I need it in this app and other apps, etc. So what do you think? Are we done?
Well, I have some thoughts, but let's hear from the audience. Does anyone else have some comments about what else we can do here? So I guess my
code in Apex. Less code in Apex.
Yeah, I was going to say my question is, or comment is that it still looks like a fair amount of code, and I'm wondering about that case statement there.
So the question would be, look, as long as we've gone this far, why is this still here?
Right.
In other words, we have a use case for this get procedure. And the use case is I'm using it in Apex. And sorry, Apex doesn't know about Booleans. Everything's a string. So I've got to convert it to yes, no. So why do it out here? So my suggestion would be that we skip over to script version 2. And now I've got an overloading. Cool. So I keep the one I had before. This is good to be used in pure backend code. Let's say if I need to call it inside another procedure, why not stick with the native Boolean? But since I have a use case in Apex, why not create a variation and pass back a string instead of a Boolean? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with overloading, I'll probably do a tip on this in the future. It's one of my favorite features. And it also has a cool alternative name, which is static polymorphism. I mean, how can you not love static polymorphism? So I have the same name. And the idea here is that it's doing the same thing. So why not give it the same name? And PL SQL will automatically figure out which is the right one to run based on the type of thing that you pass to it, the type of container. So because I go to my fourth iteration now, because I am now passing out a string, it's putting it into a string. And PL SQL will not implicitly convert Booleans to strings and vice versa. Not yet, anyway. It will automatically use this version. Let's take a look at the implementation. Because while I love overloading and I'm sure a lot of you do too, love my dogs too, but I forgot to close my office door.
Falcor.
Here, I'll close my office door. There, that's a classy thing for our first tip. Steven,
now he'll bark and scratch and scream
left.
instead, which I'm not sure will be much better.
So here's my first implementation. This is the same as it was before. And here we go. Now I've got my select statement, and I convert my formula to yes or no, right? So this is one approach I could take to building out this code. Does anybody have any concerns or issues here? Any suggestions? Let's make it a little bit smaller. See more. Any suggestions? Are you happy?
This was an older comment from Plamen when you were asking about, where to put that case statement. rather than throwing it into the package could have been a computation on the item.
Yeah, so we could add another computation just for that item. The question is what you'd be doing in the computation if you're doing an extra call. So if I'm already doing a back-end call to grab this other information, doing another, let's say, function call back to PL SQL, it seems like an unnecessary round trip. So it seems to me that it makes more sense to bundle it all here, but it's probably close to 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, and to be fair, that comment, I believe he put it in before you got to the implementation here. So it wasn't a challenge as much as a possible solution or improvement.
Okay. So when I look at this code, I say to myself, Steven, you've repeated some code. I hate to repeat code. I like my SPOD, my single point of definition. So why am I writing this query twice? Why do I have the formula appearing twice, right? Ideally, in general, when you're doing overloadings like this, you should pick one as the root implementation, and then the other should be built on top of that. So let's take a look at that iteration. I think I've got one for that.
And I believe that's what Stefan is talking to here.
So now take a look at my package spec. I've got 2 overloadings as before. And here you go, Monty. I've got functions that are specific, or they look like they're specifically about the business rule. So now if I come down and notice it's overloaded. Yes, it's overloaded as well. I can pass in a number, which is the person's ID, and get back yes or no. Or I can pass in the start date and get back yes or no. And notice I use the _yn so that anybody reading it knows what's being returned. Okay, inside my package body, now notice my formula is in one place. The whole point of this function is to encapsulate the formula. And my suggestion is that every single formula and business rule in your application should be hidden inside its own function. And that way you can manage them more cleanly. If you change it in one place. And it's a way better approach. And then so right now, Rich can come in here and say, that is a bogus implementation of this rule. It needs to be improved greatly and change it in one place. So then my other version that takes the person's ID, looks up the start date, actually looks up the start date, calls the other eligible to read right inside the select statement, and then returns that value. And I'd say you could argue this one both ways, because by calling the function inside the select inside the function, I'm doing an extra context switch, which I'd probably rather not do. But anyway, the main thing in terms of implementation here is that the formula only appears in one place. Scrolling down a little bit further, now, oh, I didn't fix this. Okay, notice I still have the repetition of the query, and I simply used my different, and then so this is bad. This is bad, bad, bad. So I would say that my Boolean, let's do some coding work. My Boolean is my core implementation. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to come down here. I love writing code live. It's the most fun ever. So what I'm going to do is use named notation to correlate these values. Beside all of this is fine. And then it's got a Boolean coming out. So I'm going to add a Boolean here. And that's what gets the value back. So it's not going directly to the parameter. Okay, good. And now, simply take this here. So now my implementation doesn't need start date anymore. Now I have one implementation of getTrInfo. And then for this specific overloading in which I have to convert my Boolean to a string, well, I convert my Boolean to a string, and then I'm done. So this is what I would consider to be the optimal implementation for this little scenario. Wow, one little tip, exploded.
It exploded. I was going to give you a heads up that we've blocked 30 minutes on people's calendars, so you've got about another 5 minutes to wrap up.
We are good. So to wrap up, watch out for always falling back on an if statement. Consider using a case expression, especially if the pattern is I'm running a bunch of if code to assign a value to a variable. If every if clause looks like x colon equals, case expression for sure. Look for opportunities, and that's in SQL as well as PL SQL. And then look for opportunities to use case statements as well. So case statements, case expressions. And then in the bigger picture, think about hiding as much logic as you can from Apex, from an Apex front-end perspective into stored program units, and then leverage those wherever you need them inside your code base. All right, that does it for me. So should we kick right over to a year?
We sure can. We've got 28 people in the Kahoot. I'm counting at least 64 people watching. Let's give people another, it's coming, got 29, 30.
Okay.
All right,
so
guys.
Make sure you're into Kahoot. We'll give it a second. So I see, Rich, that you recommended interval 1 year. That's pretty simple. So we'll look at implementing that. I'll add another variation onto this app, maybe publish it. And Stefan had a number of good points. Call the first procedure and the second. That's what I covered at the very end. You don't want to write the logic twice. And Jose mentioned include the condition in the select. So I think there are a number of ways to play out the logic, but I've decomposed it into a separate function for the rule. And the only issue there will be possibly having the context switches. All right.
Okay.
That's like a good group of people.
All right. So I think we're ready.
And we've got 30 seconds, right? Answer the quiz in 30 seconds. I'm going to take it too.
You're going to take it too? All right. Here we go.
Loading. I am so ready.
You better be number one on the podium.
So if you know, in case you know case, which one of these are true? I got to say on my phone, I can't see any of the text. I just see shapes.
So then you need to look at the screen because I'm presenting here.
Oh, okay.
The answers are there. And then you can select the right colors on your phone.
So the red choice is anywhere you have an if, you can use case. Anywhere you have case, you can use an if.
It's now showing your answers. But yeah. The answers. Okay. Yep. Sorry.
It's our first time.
It's our first time.
What just happened?
These are the winners.
Cool. Why does it say 0 out of 1? That means nobody got it right, but they got it right really fast. Anyway,
we'll have to figure this out.
We've got our data.
I'll get some reports out of Kahoot. This didn't feel as smooth. We can maybe try it again.
No, that's okay. We don't need to do it again now. We'll just get better at it.
Yeah.
That's okay. So let's go back over the quiz real quick. So basically, I said anywhere you can use an if statement, you can use anywhere you can use if, you can use case, and that's true. Then the second one was anywhere you can use case, you can use if. That is so not true because you have case expressions. You don't have if expressions. And the third choice was case is as fast as if, or was it the reverse? Case.
Let me.
So case and if, from a performance standpoint, nothing to worry about, interchangeable. And what's the last choice?
I have to bring it back up again, just a second.
So we'll definitely give it more than 30 seconds too, because Anton couldn't.
Yeah, Anton says he couldn't even read the questions. Brian says he got lucky.
It's always good to be lucky, Brian.
All right. All right.
So we'll do a cleaner job next week, but we won't keep you now. We'll just get better and better and better. So I hope the tip was useful. That's obviously the main thing. And I'll try to play around with different ideas in terms of tips. Feel free to send me a tip. You can DM me via Twitter. You can send me an email at sfeuerstein@insum.ca. Maybe we should do an alias for my last name, SFOYERSTEEN. Oh, that would be kind of fun.
Way to confuse people as if they weren't confused enough, Stephen, but we can try.
So, and Plummet asked, compared to decode, which is the fastest? So, Plummet, I have to say, I haven't seen any recent analyses of that, but I do not believe that there is any significant performance difference between them. And I think decode is just something you want to avoid. It might have a couple of different advantages, I think, in the way it deals with null. But in general, it just looks old. It's not ANSI standard. Best to avoid. All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking a half hour of your busy, busy day. And I'll see you next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. for the next PL SQL Foyer tip. Take care, everybody. Everybody stay safe. Get outdoors. Put down your machines. Save a tree.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.